Welcome to our seminar. Sorry about that short delay. We just had a few technical problems. We're here today to talk about creating agile business-driven learning. And I'm Carole Bauer from Lumesse, and I'm joined today by Paul Rudd from Pragma Consultants. So what I'm going to do is highlight some of the findings from a survey that Lumesse conducted last year, and then Paul will pick up on some of the aspects of that survey. We won't be taking questions on the floor after our presentation, as Paul's got quite a lot to cover, but we will invite you over to our stand number 121 to pick up on these conversations. Okay, so over to the survey then. In August 2012, Lumesse asked 769 leaders from 24 different countries to tell us about the state of learning. We had responses, we had a good response, and we had responses from France, UK, the US, and what we found, regardless of the size of the location and where they were based, that the results were pretty consistent. And those results actually were quite concerning. So the first thing that obviously we wanted to do was test our assumption that living with the speed of change is an issue for HR leaders. And 3/4 of HR leaders confirmed our suspicions that this is the case, that they've had to respond to change quicker and faster than ever before. And they've really noticed that in the last 5 years. And as a result, of course, that means that they need to enable their workforce much quicker. So how are they doing then? If they need to enable their workforce much quicker, how are they doing? Well, 53% can only provide learning quickly enough to keep up with the speed of change, and that's quite concerning, really. And clearly HR can be doing a lot more. 40% of HR leaders think that employees would actually not seek help from HR for learning. So where would they go to? Well, that was interesting. The follow-up survey question actually highlighted that individuals would probably prefer to go to Google for developing their skills as opposed to formal systems such as an organisation's LMS. So that's quite interesting as a trend. So HR's not delivering to its full potential, and 32% of HR leaders think that employees actually feel insecure about their job as a result. So giving you the highlights of the survey, we do have full copies of the survey on our stand, and there are some leaflets on some of your chairs, so you can look at the survey results in a lot more detail. I've just picked up some of the main points that were covered by the survey. Clearly, a new model of learning is needed, given those findings, and I'm going to hand over now to Paul Rudd, who will look at some of those key aspects.
Thanks, Carole. And about HR leaders feeling insecure, I feel insecure with all this noise going on and trying to share some ideas with you. I used to work for an HR director, and whenever he went to a conference like this, he always came back with a little bit of magic or a magic bullet. This is going to solve our problems. Now, just to set your expectations, I have got no magic bullets. What I've got is some ideas and questions to share with you, because I think the main benefit of a conference like this is to come away and reflect, have time away from the office, and maybe ask ourselves some questions. So, picking up on some of what Carole has shared with us from the Lumesse survey, and this isn't working. But that is. The type of survey Lumesse have just carried out is quantitative, deals with numbers. And I find with quantitative surveys, they tend to raise more questions than perhaps they answer. So we need to ask ourselves perhaps some qualitative questions to provide some meaning for ourselves and our own organisations. So let's start with the basics. What fundamental purpose does learning serve within your organisation? Is it strategic? Is it connected into the top team? Is it a tactical training function? Is it part of a wider organisation development function? 3 more questions. Where structurally should learning sit for greatest impact and payback? Now that's not as obvious as it sounds. I would imagine most of you out there sit somewhere within an HR type function. A few years ago I worked for a multinational organisation where I was responsible for learning, and I reported direct into the MD. And that gave the learning functions, you can imagine, fantastic leverage. So continuing on with the theme of leverage, which functional areas should learning be collaborating most closely with to enhance its leverage? And I would suggest the way organisations are going now, we're looking at parts of our organisations like corporate communications, employee engagement, marketing, but more of that later. Finally, do HR departments have an inbuilt tendency to be behind the curve in terms of anticipating business requirements? And my sense is probably they do. And anticipation, I think, is going to be a key theme for learning as we go through the forthcoming decade. We're in the 20-teens, and as I was thinking about what to share with you today, I thought, what word describes the 20-teens, the decade we're currently in? And it strikes me that we're in quite an adolescent decade. There's new rules, there's new frameworks, there's new models. And some of the questions that came to me were, we're challenging accepted norms. Lots of new experiences that form our reality. Experiential learning for governments and large organisations alike. Maybe, maybe not. A decade of transition. Fresh emerging values. Look what's happening in the banks at the moment. New patterns of behaving, new patterns of values, knee-jerk reactions. And knee-jerk reactions tends to be a pejorative comment. But actually, I think those organisations and those functions within organisations that can knee-jerk intelligently in this decade, thoughtfully, actually will have an advantage. So what may the impact be for learning? Well, let's stay for a moment outside our organisations, outside our learning functions. Let's have a look at learning as part of a system. Now, I know the type of audience that we have out there today will understand what systems thinking is all about. But 3 bullet points that for me sum up systems thinking. We're all part of a system. We're in a system here today. Our bodies are part of a system. Our families are part of a system. We introduce a new pet, a dog or a cat into our families. That changes the system. Now, within organisations, systems obviously consist of people, structures and processes that work together. And what systems thinking does is examine the linkages and interactions between the elements that make up those systems. Organisations themselves are open systems. We are buffeted on a month by month, week by week, day by day, minute by minute with some forces. It could be forces of competition, it could be legislation coming out of the government or EEC, a whole range of things. All that will impact on the way our organisations are going and the learning our organisations need. So my suggestion to you is, as we develop our programmes, particularly our more strategic programmes, we should be asking ourselves questions about what's happening out there and what's happening in here within our organisation. So the type of external questions, if you like. What's happening in society at the moment? Because that's where our new recruits, if we are recruiting, come from. What are their expectations? What's the economic climate? And there's lots of microclimates out there. There are businesses that, in spite of all the negative stuff that are going on, are growing like they never have before. Technology, obviously, and the economic climate. What's it like in here? What's our corporate focus, both strategic and tactical? And a little bit like knee-jerk reactions, I think organisations that will be successful in this decade will be very good tactically. An issue will hit them and they will respond well. They won't go away in a smoke-filled room, or we don't have smoke-filled rooms anymore, but metaphorically in a smoke-filled room and think about it. They will react intelligently and well and thoughtfully. What's our cultural direction? Not what's our culture, but what is our cultural direction? Are we moving from a collegiate collaborative style to something that's more directive? Have we come from an open culture that, because of what is going on out there, is making our culture more of a fear culture? Really important for how we position our learning and how it's accepted and how the learners engage with what the programs we're producing. But I would say that the most important phrase on this particular slide, and maybe the most important phrase in this entire presentation, is internal conversations. Learning has a really important opportunity to change the conversations within our organisations. Those of you who know anything at all about chaos and complexity will have probably heard of Ralph Stacey, one of the foremost global thinkers on this subject. And he talks a lot about the importance of conversations within organisations, and conversations change things. Conversations change things in our families, in our organisations, at government. Now, learning has critical role, more I would suggest to you than any other function, in starting up conversations and changing conversations, and that's how we can really change things. So, some learning principles for the 20 teens. I think consultants are very good with coming out with glib words and phrases like agile and business driven. What does that mean? Now, maybe it means something like being anticipatory. We've talked about the importance of just being able to anticipate what may be coming up and be flexible and agile enough to respond. Certainly need to be commercial. Certainly we need to recognise that we are an increasingly social country, world. Carole's already referred to the importance of Google. We need to be pragmatic and multi-channel, and we have talked for many years now about blended learning. I want to share something called fusion learning with you. Now, if I look up the dictionary definition for fusion, this is what it says: something new created by a mixture of ideas, qualities and things. And it provides, the dictionary I looked up provided the metaphor of jazz and funk. Now, I like that because I happen to like jazz and funk. And I went to a concert a few weeks ago where 3 jazz musicians came together. They'd never met each other before. They had different styles, different instruments, very different ages, but they came together, they fused together and produced something new and remarkable that really engaged. So I quite like the idea of the metaphor for jazz and funk. So maybe another new phrase to you, ergonomically designed learning. Now once again, if I go to a dictionary, I will read something like that, which for me took a little bit of concentrating and getting my head around. The next definition I looked up said this, which I quite liked: make things comfy and more efficient. So maybe when we evaluate our learning going forward, we could ask the question, did you find this learning comfy? Maybe not. But for me, you've got the comfy, the soft side, efficient, yeah, it's the commercial side. And doing the full circle, the systems approach to devising learning. Now this, all words, So what may this look like? And Lumesse and I have been working with a couple of clients recently, the current clients. These are projects that we're developing at the moment, which we thought we'd like to share with you, both with banks, interestingly enough, non-UK domicile banks. This particular bank is based, remarkably enough, in the Middle East, as you can probably gauge from the Arabic. They would prefer we didn't share their name, but this is a portal we've developed for them. Now, this particular project came out of an invitation I received when they took over the RBS, the Royal Bank of Scotland's wealth management function. And that immediately doubled the headcount of their existing wealth management function and gave them enormous opportunities because of the talent they were bringing in. So I was invited in as an organisation development consultant to say, what do we need to do to integrate these two teams? Very quickly, there was a perceived need arose for some very good and effective learning and personal development. So we talked about developing a wealth academy for these people. And then going back to systems thinking, of course, a wealth management function in a bank doesn't exist in isolation. It's reliant on operations, it's reliant on HR, it's reliant on leadership. So we say this isn't enough. We need to put in place a corporate university. Now, why the Ambition University? Now, some of you who may have travelled to this particular part of the world may have seen some of this particular bank's marketing around ambition. This particular bank talks a lot about being ambitious for their clients, customers, potential clients and customers. So we thought, let's take that brand and bring it within the organisation. Let's be ambitious for our employees, our own people. So the Ambition University, so the brand becomes live within the organisation. So I don't know if you can see this, but Wealth Academy, very much there, but all sorts of other academies form part of the university. And this particular portal isn't just a learning portal, it's a communication portal as well and an engagement portal. And increasingly it's becoming the single most important access of information and communication and learning within this particular bank. Here's another portal. This is something we've developed for a bank called HBZ, Habib Bank AG Zurich. Now, it might not be a name that's known to you, but a very, very, very successful and profitable bank indeed. In their niche, they are highly, highly regarded. They are not tainted with any of the stuff that some of the banks that maybe are more well known to us have been tainted by, largely by good leadership, good judgment, and possibly a lack of greed. Now, the global HR director of this particular bank had an issue. His functional heads were doing a very good job, are doing a very good job, but he wanted them more engaged with learning. So we put in place a series of faculties, and those global heads of functions become global heads of faculties. They are absolutely accountable for the learning curriculum, the learning paths, the budget, and so on. So big tie-in, and all these people sit at the top team. So this Ambition University, the H-Learning, as it's called, becomes an agenda item at the top team table every time they meet. And you can imagine what that has done for learning in that particular organisation. Now, this portal has only just been launched. It was launched in the final quarter of 2012. And we're already starting to work out with them where we go with this, because stuff doesn't stand still. We can't introduce a new portal or corporate university in our organisations and expect it is still hanging around, looking the same, feeling the same in 2-3 years' time. So this is the type of portal we are currently working with them to develop. We move from H Learning to the H Portal, a portal for HBZ people. This now is an integrated portal. This is their intranet, the place where they go for knowledge management, the place where they go for leadership. The faculties still there, but less focus on the accountability of the functional heads for them, because we've done that. RSS feeds coming in, YouTube, HTV, so videos being put up very, very quickly. On the other side, that is, if you like, the learning piece. So a truly fused, integrated approach, not just to learning, but to all the other elements that engage employees. So moving from that, in the space of 9 months or so, to that. So the branding is still there. In some ways, I think we should look at learning as a product. Look at the way our colleagues in marketing engage with their clients and customers and desired clients and customers. There's an opportunity there for us in terms of the way we look at our employees and our learners. Okay, some final thoughts. No magic bullets again, I'm afraid, but some final thoughts. As we go back to our organisations, let's keep in mind the need to avoid siloed learning. There's a real opportunity to more effectively engage with our people by looking at those other parts of the organisation. I mean, learning at the end of the day is communication. So, you know, what are we doing in our learning functions if we haven't got regular meetings with our communication colleagues? And not just internal, but external. Part of our role is to bring the external brand to life. So if our programmes aren't bringing the external brand to life, what are we doing? Let's try and build some structural accountability into the system, and the senior the better. You've seen the HBZ example. That's the type of thing I'm talking about. And just to underline this point, let's try and adopt a marketing approach to channel and content. It's about pull, not just push. Potentially a mix of the two, actually, but aim to touch, engage and connect. Our marketing colleagues aim to touch and engage and connect with the people they want to sell to market to. We should be doing the same. And in the same way, e-learning was never a magic bullet, other than maybe to drive cost out of the system. M-learning isn't a magic bullet either, and social channels aren't a magic bullet. What is a magic bullet, if there is one, is how these various channels are fused together. And finally, and this is stating, I would suggest to you the obvious, let's share clear targeted purpose and clear tangible outcomes. And we need to validate those explicitly. Now I've put there, seeing that slide now, I don't quite know why I've used the two words "if possible." If the stuff that we are investing resources, time, cash on are not supporting the corporate business objectives in some shape or form, what are we up to? And at a conference like this, we wander around and we hear about success. Some remarkable stories, wonderful stories. I'm not sure how good we are as learning professionals in marketing ourselves and our great stories internally. So, thanks for listening, and let's keep agile and business driven. Thanks, Carole.
Thank you, Paul. So, as Paul said earlier, conversations are key to change, so we're happy to continue those conversations over at our stand, number 121. The example portals that Paul showed you were built in Lumesse's learning management system, Learning Gateway, and that really does sort of support the concept of agile learning, allowing customers to build their own portals in minutes, quickly, and adapt them in seconds. So the guys from Lumesse will be happy to demo that to you, and as I said, we'll be happy to have the conversations with you on stand 121. Thank you very much. Thank you.